This lesson is on templates for seller. You want to go to TAR, click on zip form. Go to template, go to new, type in seller. This is for listing, residential, save. I'm going to go to your libraries. For what we're using, you'll be using the Texas Association of Realtors and the HAR for today. The Texas Association of Realtors. And these are all your forms that you have to choose from. First one we want to add is always the information about broker services. First one is for buyer tenant, the second one is for seller landlord. Then you want to go to residential listing agreement, exclusive right to sell, you want to go down to seller's disclosure, then you want to add your HOA, which is back up here. Addendum to property subject to mandatory homeowners association. Then we're going to go to the HAR library and pick up the first one there at the top. That's for your MUD. Go back to the TAR. You want to go down to notice of information from other sources. Seller's authorization to release information. All the way down to the bottom to the T47. We go back up to the top to, and we could put this in alphabetical order, but I put it in order of importance for when you're talking to your your seller. You want the authorization to furnish Trilla Respira, and then we want the additional this isn't a form that I use on a regular basis, so I'll give you a second to additional disclosure. This is something you're going to use every once in a while. It's your lead base. You're not going to use it very often, but we add it there anyway. Then you want to, for that one, let's go ahead and add the general information to tenant buyer. General information notice to buyer. Now this says to buyer, but it also has good information for the seller to know what the buyer has been made aware of. Now that we've got our forms for seller, we're going to go through and fill them out. We go to the information about broker services. Bottom, it's going to be Imagine Realty International. Let me show you a little trick. Once you've done this a couple times, all you have to do is click on that, and then you just click on it, and you don't have to type it again. There's my number, 056-2145. There's my email. And there's the office phone number. Use the office phone number. Don't use my personal. This form was designed for large offices and small offices to all use the same form. So you might, in some instances, have a licensed broker or the firm, and then you might have an additional broker of record who's not the owner of the firm. So then you would put in the broker of record. Since I am the owner, you don't have to fill anything out there. Then you might have a supervisor that supervises you as you go through the process, and you would need to put their information there. I supervise you, you don't have to fill that out. Down here you would put your information. Since this is my form, I just put mine. Your name, your license number, your email, and your phone number. Okay? Then you're going to get the buyer or tenant, landlord, or seller, whoever, to sign the bottom of this. Now, it's very important when you're presenting this that you know how to present it. You need to know what it says. You need to read every word of this so you understand exactly what you're explaining to them, but you can't explain it word for word. What you can say, and this is what I would say, is that this is one of the most important forms that we will give you. It isn't just an information sheet for you, but it's for us, it's what keeps us out of trouble. It keeps us compliant with the state, that we are required by the state to make you aware that all parties in a real estate transaction have the right to be equally represented. You as the seller are represented by the listing agreement that binds this brokerage to you. The buyer has the right to be equally represented as well, and that's done with a buyer's representation agreement. And that makes the buyer's agent have a fiduciary duty to the buyer. But if the buyer doesn't want to sign a representation agreement, then the buyer's agent very well may be working for you, the seller. So they need to make the buyer aware of that. In years past, the buyers never realized that they weren't being represented, that both agents were representing the seller. And that's an unfair advantage, really. So I think that in a lot of cases there was agency between the buyer and the buyer's agent formed, and they were being represented, but it wasn't on a form, so, or a legal contract. So now they have the availability to have a contract. Okay, then go back. It will automatically save your changes. You want to hit save if you want to, that's fine. The next one is your residential lease agreement. Now on this particular contract form, what you're going to want to do is leave this top blank, because this again is your template. The brokerage is Imagine Realty, so you can go in here. Once you've typed it a couple of times, it's already there for you, but you can type that back in. Then you want to click on the address and find, oops, because we've had several addresses, it keeps a record of all the different addresses. It may or may not put the city, so you may have to go back and find that, or just type it in. Texas, and 77450. Off the top of my head, I do not know the fax number. We don't give it out unless someone really asks for it. But the office number is 832-444-2363. If you want to put your phone number in there, that's perfectly fine. You want your email there. I don't want them emailing me, they email you. This we filled out with a link from the legal description, so for now we leave it blank. Second page, it must say who this is, who concerns. So it would say Imagine Realty, but you want to put in the property address. It may or may not say Imagine Realty, but you want to put the property address. It doesn't always show up on the second page. Fill it in on the second, it'll automatically feed to the rest of them. Exclusions. This is a very underused portion of the whole real estate field, and it could be very valuable to a seller. If there's something in the property that they don't want to leave with the property, say a chandelier or a nice mirror or any number of things that they just flat don't want to leave, you exclude it. And so you write in there that the exclusion is the mirror in the master bathroom, or the chandelier in the dining room. But you can use this in another way. You can use this as a negotiating tool. Say they're moving to a property and they've got a swimming pool now, but they go to the next property and they're going to have a swimming pool, and they don't have a very big backyard. They're going into an apartment or they're going into a condo or something, and they don't really have the space for it, so they don't really want their patio furniture anymore. Or it could be their washer and dryer because they're buying a brand new one. Or it could be the refrigerator because it doesn't fit in the new place, or they're getting a new one of those, and they don't really want this stuff anymore. They're willing to leave it with the property and give it to the buyer. You can use that as a negotiating point. You can say that you're excluding the washer and dryer, refrigerator, patio furniture, whatever. What happens when you do that, if you tell somebody that they can't have something, it makes them want it. And I found this out whenever we were selling a house years ago. We had put in a new microwave over the range, which now is common practice in the lower end properties. But at that time, it was a high-end addition to the home. It was well over $1,000, and this is back in the 80s, where $1,000 really was a lot of money. So we put that in, and when we got ready to sell the house, I said, I'm not leaving it. I'm taking it with me. And I'd put in a beautiful Hunter fan over the breakfast area, and I'm not taking that either. I mean, I'm taking that too. I'm not leaving it for the buyer because I'd paid $400 for that fan. You can remember this is back in the 80s, where $400 was a lot of money. You could buy the same fan today for $400, and it's a fraction of what it was back then. So I said, I'm not leaving it. And so when it came down to get an offer on the house, they made the offer, but they added back in that the microwave was staying and the fan was staying. I said, absolutely not. And it was a point of, I wasn't negotiating on that. And so they went back and forth, and between the agents and the buyer, they came up with a deal. They would pay me full price for the house plus an additional $1,500 to cover the microwave and the fan, and buy me a microwave countertop to take to my new house. That was a very great learning experience for me. They could have bought a new microwave and a fan cheaper than what they did for that, and they could have got a discount on the house, but by me telling them they couldn't have it, it made them want it. So use that when you get a chance, when you're trying to sell a property and the seller needs to get as much money out of the property as they can. They all want it, but some need it. But there's things that they don't really want. Exclude it. See if that can't be a negotiating point for your seller. Explain to your seller what you're going to do. Say, you know what, I know you don't want it, but if we tell them they can't have it, then they're going to want it. And if they want it, they may want to be willing to pay for it, rather than just adding it in. Then we're going to go down to the homeowners association. We put it is. In most cases, it is in the homeowners association. If it's not, you can come back and take that out. List price will be decided by the seller later. Terms are always for 6 months minimum. And our fee for listing for everything that we do is 7%. Now here's the advantage of putting 7%. Again, if you tell somebody they can't have something, they're going to want it. And when everybody else is doing 6% and we're doing 7%, and although we can qualify for that 7% simply because of our 3D video and our HDR photos and our security system that we add and our international marketing that nobody else is doing, we can justify 7% for that. But if they come back and they say, but everybody else is doing it for 6%, you have the option to say, okay, with everything that we're doing, over and above everybody else, in order to get you this listing, we would have to give all of that to you for 6%. Is that what you're telling me, Mr. Seller? Is that in order for us to get this listing, we have to go at 6%? And if he says yes, then you say, okay, let me call the broker and get authority, because I do not have authority to take anything less than 7%, because the broker provides everything. And call me up, and I will agree to 6%. And you got a full 6% listing. A lot of sellers will agree to the 7%. But if they don't agree to the 7% and you think you can get it at 6%, then you've got it for 6%. If we went in at 6% and they'd want 5%. Because everybody wants to get a deal. So now they feel like the hero because they got everything that we offer over and above any other brokerage out there, and they got it for the same amount as the other. So they just got a bargain, and you got what we need. Okay, we go on down to the next page, fees and reimbursements. In this office, there is a $600 early termination or withdrawal office administration fee. I think there's only one D in that. And what that means is that if they terminate from this office or they withdraw before the 6 months is up, they owe the office $600. It doesn't go to the agent. It goes back to the office. It covers the advertising and the marketing that we do, plus the cost of putting the sign out, the lockbox, everything that this office provides. So that's what goes back to the office. Explain that to your seller. And what happens with this, I can tell you that in the 10 years that I've been doing this, when I've been adding this fee for probably at least the last 8 years, I have never had a termination. They just flat don't want to pay that fee. So add it in there. It keeps you from losing a listing. Protection period is 90 days. You need to read this thing because a lot of agents get this wrong. They think that if for 90 days, if anybody comes back and buys that property, that saw the property while they had it listed, that they're going to get paid. But if you come back down here, it says if the seller agrees to sell the property during the protection period to a person named in the notice, which means you have to give a notice within 10 days, or relative to the person of the notice, the seller will pay the broker upon closing of the sale the amount the broker would have been entitled to receive if the listing were still in effect. But paragraph 5E survives termination of the listing. 5E will not apply if the seller agrees to sell the property during the protection period. The property is exclusively listed with another broker who is a member of the Texas Association of Realtors at the time the sale is negotiated, and the seller is obligated to pay the other broker fee for the sale. Which means if you lose the listing and you give them the list and they go with another agent, you're not getting paid. So it's kind of bogus in itself. If they ever read that completely, they'd understand. But the fact that you put it in there 90 days, that it means that with the protection period, and when you've given them a list with 10 days of everybody that's seen the property, that means you have to go back into centralized showing, which is another reason why we use centralized showing, and get a list of the agents that show the property. If they didn't list the buyer's name, you have to call the agent up, get the buyer's name. You just need their name. You're not going to go contact them, but you need the name in order to fill this form out. You present that back to the seller within 10 days. You're protected as long as they don't go and list with another agent, but you don't have to tell them that. They have to read the contract themselves. Okay? Harris County is where we get paid because that's where our office is at. Broker will be listing on the MLS. If the seller says he doesn't want it on the MLS, he doesn't want his property on the internet, you can't do anything but put a sign in the yard. That's it. Because they can't go on the website. They can't go on the MLS. So it's not out there for the world to see. And there are sellers out there who believe that they're being watched. And if somebody sees it on their house on the internet, then somebody's going to come break into their house and steal everything they've got, or the government's going to come find them, or whatever. So there's a bunch of paranoid people out there. So if they do say they don't want to be on the internet, they can't be on anything, just a sign in the yard. You have to explain that to them. I haven't personally had anybody, but I hear it has happened. Centralized showing service. Is where we get make our appointments. You need to explain to that seller that we use a separate company to make the appointments. That company will call them to see if they're available at the time the agent wants to see it. The agent will be vetted to make sure that the agent is licensed and a member of HAR. If they're not a member of HAR, they will not get an appointment. Explain to them we use this to make sure that only realtors get access to the property. But if somebody calls and they're not a realtor, we will open the door for them and we will be there with them. This is your opportunity to explain what a realtor is, that we are held to a fiduciary duty, but we are also held to a higher standard, and that we can be punished if from the association if we do not live up to the higher standard. We have a code of ethics that we have to apply, that we have to abide by, and they need to be aware of that. They don't know. Until we tell them, they have no idea. So you can say there are agents out there, agents licensed by the state of Texas, but they're not realtors. And they may have buyers. So when they call and make an appointment, I'll be there to watch them, to make sure that, you don't have to say watch them, but basically that's what it is, to make sure that when they come through the property, you're still represented by a realtor. I'll be there. Key box is in most cases allowed to put on the door, sometimes not. We've got condos that you can't put lock boxes on, and there's some buyers, sellers just say absolutely not. You're not going to put a lock box on the door. You have to make an appointment, and I'll make sure that the door is open when they're there, and that's fine if they don't want a lock box. But if they do, you need to explain that we only use Supra. And now's your opportunity to explain another advantage of using a realtor. Supra can only be opened by a realtor. And so that again, it's a way of showing them that we go to that extra step to protect their property. Nobody can get into it if they don't have a key. They can't get a key if they're not a realtor. MLS participants, if they are a sub-agent or they are a represented buyer, they're going to get paid. We don't care. If they're a non-realtor, they're still going to get paid. We don't care. Whoever brings the buyer is going to get paid. And now's your chance to explain that there are realtors out there that will not pay a sub-agent. They have to represent the buyer. They will not pay a non-MLS, which means they're not a realtor. They're just agents, and they won't pay them either. So what happens if an agent sees it on the MLS or sees it someplace and sees that they're not going to get paid? Are they going to bring the buyer? Absolutely not. They have a living to provide for their family. So now some will, but in most cases, put yourself in their place. If you have an option of showing your house and getting paid nothing, or showing the house next door and getting paid 3%, which one are you going to show? So we offer to everybody. Intermediary status. Explain to them what intermediary status is. That means that any agent in our office can bring a buyer to their property. If they say they do not want intermediary status, then not one of our 20+ agents can bring a buyer to their property. They really don't want to limit the number of buyers coming to their property. Here's where you want to mark if they do not want it on the MLS. If they do not want it on the internet, period, they have to mark that. In most cases, they'll take conventional loan, they'll take cash, and FHA. You need to discuss the VA. Explain to them the VA that there are some things that the vet cannot pay for, and the seller may very well be asked to pay for it. I think it's about $1,800 total. So explain that to them. But if they want to sell it quickly, there's a lot of vets out there that are looking for homes. This part right here, seller's representation, in talking about whether they're paying their bills. You need to know that. Are they behind in their house payment? Are they behind in their taxes? Are they behind in the HOA? Because any one of those can cause a foreclosure, and you can be in the middle of a listing and even get a buyer, and they go into foreclosure and everything falls apart. They have to make you aware. And so you need to go over that and make sure, are you up to date on everything? The other things, are they being relocated by their company? If they're being relocated by their company, this can affect your commission. Some companies are charging up to 49%. So relocation companies, you're sitting there talking to the seller. The seller says, oh yeah, I need to list the property. And then you find out that they're working with the relocation company, and the relocation company will have to be notified, and you will have to be vetted. If this brokerage has already been vetted by several relocation companies, so that may not be the problem. The problem is that when it's all said and done, you're going to do all the work and the relocation company is going to get 49% of the commission before there's any split with the brokerage. I've done it many times. It's not an easy pill to swallow. Special provisions, absolutely nothing without my permission. Nothing ever goes to special provisions before it goes by me first. That's the one place that could get us in trouble for practicing law. We are not attorneys, we are realtors. Addenda to the contract. You're going to have the information about broker services. You're going to do the seller's disclosure. You're going to do the MUD. And then if it is built past 1970s, prior to 1976, you're going to need the lead-based paint. Those are the main things that are in there. Oh, the T47 will be added if there's an existing survey. I don't typically mark that one because in a lot of cases there's not a survey. But if there is, then you just need to go mark it. You want to come in here. It should automatically say Imagine Realty International if it doesn't type it in. And then my license number is 0562145. This would be your name down here, not mine. And then you would have marked that the broker associate signature is an authorized agent of the broker. Mark that. Hit save. And back. Seller's disclosure, you fill out nothing on that. It should have the address in here by now because you've already filled it out on the listing agreement, so it should auto feed into this. If it doesn't, add it to it. Mandatory property subject to, or addendum property subject to mandatory HOA. You want to put the address in here. You want the HOA's name and phone number so that the buyer's agent can confirm the information you put on there. You need to contact them yourself to find out what is the transfer fee and what additional fees they may be charging, because now they're charging up to $200 and $250 for the transfer fee, which is just changing the name from the seller to the buyer's name, which is another bogus way of them making money. And then the other thing is they're charging, when you get down here, for that the authorization to release information. They're charging the title companies or the buyer or seller, because the title company won't pay it, in order to release information to see if they're in default in any way. And the buyer has the right to know if they're in default. The loan officers may want to know. So you need to make sure that what are the fees for that. Because what you want to put up here is that the buyer is going to pay for any additional fees, but you want to put in here the total of fees that they could be charged. So they could be charged up to $200, $250 for the transfer fee. There may be another $200 for the documentation. So you want to put in the $4,500 that the buyer's going to pay for, and the seller would pay for any excess. But you need to know those numbers because you need to put those in the MLS. So you call that title company, that HOA, and you find out that information. That's part of your job. Then you would hit save, go back. Next is the MUD. I'm going to show you real quick what you have to do on the MUD. You have to, when you're doing the listing, you want to go in and pull up the tax records first. So typically what I do is, before I start doing the listing, I go back and see, was there any place where the property was listed prior. So we're going to use this active listing right here. I don't know whose listing this is, doesn't matter. And I would print this if it's already sold, so you have some information about the property already in your hot little hands. Then go to the go to the tax, and this is where you're going to find the information about which MUD. This is West Memorial MUD. So you're going to go close that out, and you're going to go back up here to tax. You're going to go MUD bond information. You're going to look up West Memorial MUD. right here. And here's where you're going to get your information. So keep that file open. And when you see across here, you've got your 0.43. Copy that. Come back over to your zip form. This is where you're going to put that. And you have to hit the space bar in order for it to stay there. Your mud, this is where you're going to put in your West Memorial. Now, you're not going to do this in your template. This is how you fill it out when you do it to list. So you would put your West Memorial mud here. Now here's where it gets tricky. You got leave this line alone. Don't touch it. Go down to this one here. You're going to go in and pull up the last number. And you're going to put that in this box right here. Remember, hit your space bar or it won't stay. Then you're going to go to the last box. You're going to come back to your mud and you're going to pick up this number. And you're going to put that there. It is not, remember, hit that space bar. It is not going to make any sense, but this is the way it works. The last number goes first, the first number goes last, because of the way the forms are filled out. I don't know why the forms weren't written to match the statements, but they weren't. So you have to remember to flip those around, because what they're asking is how much of the money that's been on the bond has been used, and how much was the total bond. Then you're going to come down here in this line. You're going to put in the description. Legal description is what they're asking for, but go ahead and put the actual address as well. Lot, block, and the neighborhood, and then put the actual address as well. Now, I'm going to take these back out because this is not something you want in your template. Your template should have nothing in it, because you're not going to fill anything out until you actually have a listing. Next is informational from other sources. This, I have to tell you, this is important, and a lot of agents don't use this form. This is important because there was a lawsuit several years ago back in Dallas where the buyer wanted to make sure they didn't pay more than a certain square foot price for a property, which I don't know why they didn't see it till after closing, but after closing they received the appraisal on the property, and the square footage was smaller than what the MLS said, which meant they paid more per square foot than they had very specific to their agent that they wouldn't pay, and they sued the agent and they sued the listing agent and they won. So you want to make sure that when you put this in here that your information, where you got your information from, and you can go ahead and put Imagine Realty in here. And you put it to the buyer. So this isn't a form you fill out right away. This is a form you fill out later. But you put to the buyer, and you put the property address and the date, and that you got the information from the MLS, that you did not measure the property. Now, if you got it from an appraisal, that's better. But if you say you don't get it from the MLS, you got it from the tax records. And so you identified the property, where you got the information from, and fill this out and sign it and stick it so that whenever you get an offer, you send that back to that. This needs to go on your on the MLS so that the other agent can show it to the buyer and the buyer can sign off that they are aware that you didn't measure it. I'm not saying it's foolproof from keeping you from getting sued, but it certainly can't hurt. The next one is the seller's authorization to release information. You will find as you're calling listings to find out if it's still available, because it's not as bad now as it was for the last couple of years, but you could call up on a property. It still says it's active on the MLS because they have 3 days to change it from active to option pending, but it still says it's active. So you call the agent up and say, is the property still available? And they say, oh yeah, it's still available. Go ahead and show it. Or they say, no, we've got an offer on it already. I just haven't changed it on the MLS. Or they say, we've got multiple offers. Bring another one. You'll get any number of responses from the agent. But what a lot of agents are neglecting to do is getting this form filled out and getting permission ahead of time to say anything when you call. Because if they say it's clearly on the contract that they cannot divulge any information is considered privileged. Even the fact that it may still be active, still be available. So you have to be very careful what you say when the agent calls you, and listen to what the other agents are saying, because a lot of times they are not doing the full fiduciary duty to their client, and they may not have this form signed, and they may not have permission. You do not have permission to say that that you have an offer on it, that you have multiple offers, without written permission from the seller. So don't do it. And if the seller says, no, I don't want you to say anything, then you say, I'm sorry, that's privileged information. Even if they're saying if it's still active. I said, what does it show on the MLS? It's easier for us if we call and they say, we've already got an offer on it, and I just haven't updated the MLS yet. That would be so much easier. And they will tell you. But in this office, you better not ever say anything if you don't have it in writing first, because you put this whole office in jeopardy. T47, if they have a survey already and they have nothing's changed, which means concrete being poured. Now they can have a metal building out back and it's not on the survey, but if there's not a concrete pad, it doesn't have to be. But if they put in a swimming pool, or they've added additional patio or additional driveway, or they've put a concrete pad for a storage building, the survey has to be updated. So if they don't need a new survey, they've got an existing one. It has the stamp and the signature on it. In most cases, the mortgage company is going to accept it, but they have to fill out a T47. This has to be notarized. So you give this to the seller. You tell them, go down to the title company, take the survey with them, or hopefully you have a copy of it as well. But if they only have one copy of it, then take the survey with them and go down to the title company, fill this out, and they will make copies of the survey, and they will notarize this. This is the one thing they're going to have to do for themselves. You can't do it for them. Even if you're a notary, you can't do it. Okay, the authorization to furnish truly integrated disclosures. This is a new form, and this is for the lender, the title company, the escrow agent, and other representatives that you put in the property, that the seller or the buyer gives permission for the broker to find out what's going on with the deal as it's going through. So once this is filled out, I can call the lender and say, what's going on? Where do we stand? If this isn't filled out, they don't have to tell me. So you need to make sure this is filled out. Additional sales disclosure. This is for lead-based paint, and this basically, we don't use this very often, but when you do need to use it, you just need to fill it out, and the seller just needs to say, are they aware that there's lead-based paint, or are they not? And then it goes into your disclosures. And the last one is the general information to the buyer. I like to give this to the seller just so the seller knows what the buyer knows, and it talks about, what the brokerage, the annexation, appraisal, brokers. It is just a information sheet that kind of explains some of the things that they should be taken to consider, like termites and mineral rights and multiple listing and sex offenders. We're not allowed to say where to go, so what to do on that. So this shows them, so it frees it up for us. But it's just general information, and we just give that to the buyers as well as to the sellers. And that's it.